Welcome to They Live by Film. Adam Lundy here with a special update regarding upcoming content. So, as you know, for the last few months, because of a few mitigating factors, us wanting to experiment and me being away on leave after the birth of my daughter, we were doing a few different types of episodes. Obviously, we started off the year with our Kubrick special, and then when I went away, poor Chris and Zach had to do a Lars von Trier special, and then we went the completely opposite direction when I came back, and we did obviously the Fast and Furious specials, which have just wrapped up. So we just wanted to just take a couple of weeks and kind of recalibrate ourselves and sort of give ourselves a breather after the Fast and Furious movies. And this special update is for a couple of things. It's just to kind of let you know that we are still going to be around. We're still going to be back to normal. We are going to have our next kind of regular episode coming out in a couple of weeks. It's not going to be until the 23rd of August, so a few weeks from now. We are going back to our normal format. We're going to be sort of choosing films each week, for each other to watch. The theme that I've gone with, I'm going to be the first guy back, and the theme that I'm choosing is Fritz Lang films. So if you did want to sort of watch ahead of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about M, Scarlet Street, and Secret Beyond the Door for our Fritz Lang week. Fritz Lang is obviously one of my favorite directors. Zach had only seen one of his films and it was terrible. I can't remember how many Chris had seen, but it seemed like a good way to introduce Zach to a really great director I'm surprised he hasn't seen more of. And we're going to continue on from there, going back to our normal format of swapping themes every week. And of course, obviously, we'll have interview episodes in between. But that's not the only news. We actually have some really exciting news, and which is the kind of main reason I'm coming back here today to give you a heads up. So as a kind of group behind the scenes, we've been talking about how we can maybe extend what we're looking to do, and we've already done that a little bit. Obviously, we're part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network now. If you haven't listened to the other sister networks on that network, sister podcasts on that network, I should say, I will leave a link in the description. There's a lot of really, really great people with some really cool podcasts that we really would recommend. And we're sort of extending that a little bit, but keeping kind of within our own They Live by Film brand. So there's going to be 2 new podcasts starting in August, and you're going to get a sneak peek for one very shortly. The first one is being done by Chris, and it's called Punk Vacation, and it's a Vinegar Syndrome podcast. So if you're a Vinegar Syndrome fan, this is going to be something you're going to love. Chris is going to be doing a deep dive every month into the newest Vinegar Syndrome releases. Obviously, that's something he's super passionate about. He's been a huge supporter of the label. Obviously, we've had people from Vinegar Syndrome on the podcast before. He's really excited about that. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a great way to kind of branch more into the physical media side of things, which is something that we obviously do with our interviews, but we don't really get to do a whole lot with our film discussion. So Chris is going to be doing that. The first episode of that is actually going to be going live this Friday, so the 2nd of August. And you're actually going to be able to get a sneak preview of that episode right now over, if you search Punk Vacation, I will also link it in the description, but also at the very end of this, if you want to stick around after I've wrapped up, I'm going to play the kind of teaser episode 0 that Chris has put together for this podcast that he's done. The other podcast that's going to be coming up, it's going to be a few more weeks. It's probably going to be not next, or actually, yes, no, next week. I've forgotten my calendar. It's either going to be dropping the 9th or the 10th of August. Can't remember exactly, but I will link back to it in a future episode. But it's a podcast that I'm doing and something that I'm really, really passionate about. And it's called the Radiance Films Podcast. And it is what it says in the tin. It's a podcast about Radiance Films. As regular listeners would know, Radiance Films is something that I'm super, super positive and super in love with. It's a boutique label that has really ingrained itself into my heart and soul, and I love it. I'm a huge fan of the collection. I'm a huge fan of everything Fran Simeone has done with building this label up from the ground, like just over 18 months ago, which is crazy with how big they've grown in such a small time. But I'm really, really excited to drop the first episode because Fran himself is going to be the guest. So what better way to kick off a podcast about a boutique label than to have the founder of the label on to kind of give his endorsement. So I'm super grateful to Fran to do that. I'm really excited to do this podcast. Like the Punk Vacation one, it's going to be monthly. We're going to be deep diving into releases, both the actual ones that have come up and also the most recently announced slate. We're going to be doing a deep dive into those. I have some cool guests lined up already that are going to take us to the end of the year, and obviously that's going to continue on. And you're probably wondering what Zach's doing. Well, Zach is actually going to go on a different route, which is equally cool. Obviously, we tried to break into YouTube, and it was hard for us to kind of keep on top of it. So Zach is going to take YouTube under his wing. He's going to be launching a really cool series called They Die by Film, which is going to lean more into the horror and thriller stuff that he likes. He'll hate me for using the word thriller, but I did it anyway. He's going to do some really cool videos and stuff on that, highlighting not just like, reviews, but like latest news and stuff like that. I know he's going to have some guests lined up to come on there as well. So he's going to be taking charge of the YouTube side of stuff. So if you are, one of these people who love YouTube, and I get it, I'm a YouTube guy as well, and you wish that our stuff was on YouTube more, then thankfully, that will be coming in the near future. There's no exact start date for that one just yet, but obviously we'll let you guys know in a future episode when that has happened. So just to recap, next Day Live by Film discussion episode will be out on the 23rd of August. That'll be the Fritz Lang films. It's possible we might have an interview before then on the 16th. Just obviously keep an eye. You'll see if it drops. Punk Vacation number 1 is going to be dropping on the 2nd of August. So this coming Friday, you will have a teaser of that coming up shortly. And then the first episode of the Radiance Films Podcast will be dropping either the Friday or the Saturday, either the 9th or the 10th. I'm recording with Fran on the 9th, so it just depends on how fast I can get it out at that stage. So it's possible it might not be until the Saturday, but it will for sure be next weekend, so the weekend of the 9th of August. So yeah, until then, hope you enjoyed this little catch up from me. Hope you guys are enjoying your summer. Hope you enjoyed the Fast and Furious movies. I am going to try and be more vocal on our Twitter. We do have a Twitter account. For those who want to give it a follow, it is literally at They Live by Film. I'm going to try and be a bit more active over there. If anyone wants to give us a follow, want to engage in any of the posts, that would obviously be really, really cool as well. And yeah, for now, I'm going to wrap up here. And in a few seconds, you're going to be hearing the dulcet tones of Mr. Chris Haskell as he talks you through his next venture. Take care.
Welcome to Punk Vacation, a Vinegar Syndrome podcast. My name is Chris Haskell. You may know me from They Live by Film. You may not know me. I hope you get to know me through this journey. I want to use this podcast to find the joy in unhinged creativity. I want this to be a podcast dedicated to bringing awareness and context to movies of any budget, from anywhere in the world, and during any time in history. Personally, I believe I'm qualified to do an unofficial Vinegar Syndrome podcast because I've been a subscriber since Black Friday of 2021. With They Live by Film, I've interviewed most of the partner labels. There's still a few that have snuck under my insistent request. I've also been watching VS kind of just rise up in the industry and become this industry powerhouse that goes across genre and across budget. Like I said, I mean, it's just become a really important player in Hollywood and in media. And I want to track to see how high they go. I'm fascinated by them. I'm fascinated by their business model. I'm fascinated by their dedication to the craft. They've completely surpassed Criterion as far as giving incredible treatment to the films they release. They're creative with packaging. They're creative with extras. They're creative with marketing. Their business plan is unique. Everything they do feels grassroots and startup energy. And from the outsider's in perspective, I love it and I want to draw attention to it. I chose the name Punk Vacation, if anyone's curious. I grew up punk to an extent. That was the music I listened to. That was kind of my identity for several years of my childhood. And I've always kind of been friends with metalheads and punks, and I love that lifestyle. And when I saw this movie, I was laughing because it was clear the director had not ever really been around a lot of punks. And that to me kind of sums up some of the fun that's held in Vinegar Syndrome, where you get these one-off directors or these kind of unknown directors just trying stuff, and they have their own budget. They go raise their own money. They have a DIY project. They're going out and making products that they want. Products, that's funny. Making movies they want, and they're going out and having a good time. And that's why I want this podcast to go. It's why I love Vinegar Syndrome. How I want to do it around the first of each month, I'm going to discuss the new releases that are announced. Maybe I've seen them, maybe I haven't. Discuss a little bit about what's exciting about them. And I want to highlight 1 to 2 catalog titles that need love. We'll go back, look backwards in the catalog. And then around the 15th of each month, I'll discuss everything that was released the month before. I usually get it in around the 24th, 25th of each month in the mail. So I'll just watch them, have them ready to discuss around the 15th. And we're going to discuss everything that Vinegar Syndrome put out through their sublabels. And we'll also discuss a few of the OCN partner titles that was able to sneak in as well. So let's dive in. I think what I want to do today is just to give a small taste of what's going to be on each episode. So what I want to do, I want to have a segment called The Human Tornado. The Human Tornado is going to be looking back at the catalog and finding Vinegar Syndrome titles that aren't discussed as much, that need to be discussed. No better place to start than the movie Punk Vacation itself, right? Given where we are in the history of this podcast, being episode 1. All right, so let's get into it. Punk Vacation is a 1987 movie made by one-time director Stanley Lewis. Okay, not a lot of action in the Hollywood scene. Okay, the Blu-ray for this was released years ago from Vinegar Syndrome, so slipcovers sold out, obviously going for a lot on eBay. However, they do have a standard edition, and there's it's on their website. It's easy to get. It's cheap right now. It's $27. There's no subtitles on the disc, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I know they weren't doing that early on. This is just that it took a little while to kind of get their machine rolling to what it is today. It's a quick film, 93 minutes. It's one of these movies that I wouldn't recommend as a starter for people getting into maybe the different types of corners of cinema away from the mainstream. I wouldn't say this is the first one I would recommend. This is one for people with a little bit more of a refined palate. It gets trashed on a lot, and I'm not going to say it's the best movie ever made, but I'll spend a little bit of time defending it here in just a moment. It's a decently popular film on Letterboxd as far as a no-name movie that doesn't have a lot of attention. It has 1,277 views at the time of recording this. It's incorrectly listed as a 1990 film, so on Letterboxd, I guess I'm going to go try to change that later. If that's changed, that's because my change went through. This movie was made around 1984, released, took a while to come out. It's released officially in 1987. So the basic premise of this is you've got these punks that are just kind of, traveling around, hanging out, loitering, causing trouble. They find a campground. One of the guys goes into town to get like a soda or something. Soda machine, the vending machine eats his money. He starts banging on it, as punks do, according to Stanley Lewis. Starts freaking out. escalates to where the old man that owns the establishment with the vending machine comes out, tries to break it up. This escalates even further. His friends come in. Guy that has his money stolen gets hurt, ends up in the hospital. Old man dies that owns the establishment or gets hurt. I can't remember. I think he dies. Doesn't matter really. Um, his daughter vows revenge. She gets the help of the local police, which kind of turns into just like the local community. So we have this situation kind of building throughout the film where the punks are there in a group and they're trying to go into the city and they're trying to get their friend back. And you've got this other sort of storyline where this army's building up of local townsfolk, usually kind of country, kind of stereotypically country. And there's a big battle at the end between the punks and the town. They're trying to save themselves from this motley crew. Uh, this is one of those movies that had kind of it didn't really have a huge vision to begin with. I think it just was kind of I can't tell exactly what Stanley Lewis was going for here, in terms of why this was written, why this was made. It's an interesting point, it's an interesting film in history because it's a horrible representation of punks, first of all. And I think the pleasure from this movie comes from just sort of leaning back and rolling with the weird like alien dialogue that happens throughout. So you have this storyline going on with a lot of violence and like a lot of, kind of um, the punks are either getting attacked or planning an attack to go into the city, or there's all this kind of strategy going on about how they're going to come out of there once this tension heats up and once it's kind of a war. But the characters in the camp, in the punks camp, are like having just conversations about going to technical school and not getting out of this world, maybe going back and back into the band, or like they're not fully present. They're, I guess in a way you might be able to argue that it's like good dialogue as far as kids just being knucklehead kids and not understanding the gravity of what they're saying. But really, I think if we're being honest, like this is a movie that's fun to just kind of sit back and relax with and laugh at the dialogue and just kind of have fun with it. Like the writers were two gentlemen, Harvey Richardson and Lance Smith, were credited as the writers on this. Neither one of them had many credits to their name. So, this is a film that's just friends getting together and making something that they wanted to make. Again, not really totally clear what that is, not really totally clear what the point of this is. What is there like a lesson here? Not really sure. But it's fun. I had a great time with it. And I wanted to name the podcast after this movie because to me it represents a lot of the things, a lot of the reasons I love Vinegar Syndrome, which is preservation, number one. Like this movie should be preserved. It's an interesting side project from somebody that never was in film again, as far as at least as a director goes. It's a fascinating piece of history, and I would love, there's this thing about how 50% of all silent films are lost, or maybe more. I forget the exact stat, but some insane number of silent films are lost. And you think about what people are going to say about 80s movies in 100 years. If so, people that are looking to go deep into this era, what's happening through Vinegar Syndrome and through a lot of companies like them. Severin is another good one. There's a lot of these companies that are sort of focused on that 60s, 70s, and 80s genre and exploitation cinema. They are doing a good job of capturing history. And every time I watch it, I smile because I just think about, like, man, how sweet would it be for us to have that same thing from the teens and the 20s, where, our perception of silent film might be different if we actually had access to those movies. Like there's a whole story that Captain Gibb has told on one of our earlier podcasts on They Live by Film, if you want to go back and listen to that. But he basically talks about how there is a phenomenal amount of female Russian filmmakers And so you can study about that academically and you can read about them, but it's difficult to watch their movies because they're just not there. Well, that's cool though, right? Like how different would the world kind of discussion around film be if we knew that in the 20s and teens, it was sort of like the Wild West. It was like a gold rush in a way. Everybody was just rushing to figure out how this new technology kind of worked and how to distribute it and how to make it. And so there was like this burst of creativity and like there was a ton of female filmmakers and leads and writers and cinematographers and like there's all this incredible these incredible movies that were made that'll just never get seen. And I think that's a bummer. And I think when we talk about it in the context of restoring and preserving movies from the 20s, there's an air of like importance to it. And I want to put that same level of attention and focus on the work Vinegar Syndrome is doing for movies like Punk Vacation. Because is it great? No, honestly, not. It's not like a great movie. Okay, is it good? I don't know. That's a completely subjective statement, right? Like there are things in it that are highly entertaining. There's things in it I liked. It satisfied that itch I had for what I go to when I go to Vinegar Syndrome, and I love it. And I named the podcast after it, kind of for what it represents. So I think you get the point. I won't belabor it just for the sake of hearing myself talk, but I think preservation is very important. The other thing I think is important about movies like this is that there was an ability on VHS and on DVD to go look for these movies. They were, especially VHS, there was, a lot of people that were pressing their own tapes and they were kind of played locally or regionally, and they were in video stores regionally. So for people that grew up in the area in like Southern California, they may have seen Punk Vacation from Stanley Lewis. That might have been on a video store shelf for a while, right? So there's like these little pockets of history that maybe never made it national or international, but for a group of people, this was sort of a part of their childhood or part of their experience. And there's something really exciting and fun for me, and I know a lot of people feel this way. When you used to go to a video store on, a Friday night or whatever, and you go walk through the shelves and you pick up something with a cool looking cover, you have no idea what you're about to get into, right? Sometimes it was awful, like awful. And we'll get into some of the ones Vinegar Syndrome has done. I'm not a homer. They've put out some terrible films. Looking at you, Dr. Jekyll's Dungeon of Death. So we'll get into that. And there's some ones that were like, okay, I think this would fall into that category of like just enough in there to kind of keep me into it. And then there's some like the Telephone Book, which I'm sure I'll talk about pretty soon on an episode, that just floored me with how good it was. That movie should absolutely be discussed as a classic, 100%. Art house film, I don't care, however you want to say it, whatever you want to say about it. It checks every box. And the fact that you could go into a video store and you could have one of those three experiences, there was something kind of exciting about it. And you kind of built a movie night around this, right? So Punk Vacation was a movie night for people. And I think that there is something important about having that experience, and you want to be able to balance out where not everything you're watching is just kind of like banger after banger, right? I understand why that's ideal, but it loses the power of the good films if you're never seeing a mediocre or a bad movie. You've got to have that balance. You've got to have the shadow and the light. You've got to have the pain to feel the pleasure, right? It's got to be there. That's true for everything in life. I think it's true for film as well. I know it seems like a weird point to stand on, but it's important to me, and it's why I'm open and I'm constantly searching for new things to watch, and I don't care. I never read about them before I watch them. Don't care what the reviews are. I just want to see it and make an opinion for myself. I would have never watched Action USA if I wasn't on the hunt, and that's one of my favorite films. So, Punk Vacation is not one of my favorite films, but I love what it represents. I like the name, and there we go. We're going to make a podcast out of it. I hope you listen twice a month. And if you've not heard of They Live by Film and you want to check us out, that's where all the interviews are for the OCN partner labels. And we've spoken to Mr. Low Liberty as well. So a lot of Vinegar Syndrome connects. Sam Deegan as well, who's working for Vinegar Syndrome right now. So a lot of Vinegar Syndrome connects, and it's a part of my life, and I can't wait to grow with y'all. And I'm on Reddit. I'm on the Vinegar Syndrome Discord. I'm in a lot of places online. It's not hard to find me. Please let me know if there's anything you want to hear more of. I will say up front, if anybody wants to throw their name in the ring and talk about merch, I'm not a merch guy. I know Vinegar Syndrome sells a lot of it. If you're a merch person and you love the merch they put out and you want a little corner of the podcast, I would love to give you a 5-minute segment and just sell merch for Vinegar Syndrome. No problem with that. That's just not me. So I don't want to sit there and talk about pins and I don't know, all the other random stuff, the water bottles, whatever they have. That's not really my thing. All right. Hey, see you all around. Thanks so much for listening. And yeah, talk soon.